that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever it happens to be at the time you're watching. This is the Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. Tom Fennell, unfortunately, is not here today because he's not feeling well. He's got a problem with a knee. And I have two guests today, one of whom is Alex Fay, a famous physicist to be. And the other one is Steve Reucroft, who is a famous physicist, has been.
Has been, that's right. Yeah.
I knew you were going to do that, so I figured I'd just do it for you.
You got it in first.
Every week we put this together, and what happens here is that I have a blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com, and I go online looking for headlines, and I relating to global warming and climate change and more especially energy. And I record the ones that I think are the most important to the blog and post them usually 10 or 15 on a daily basis. And that puts me into a position where I can pretty much track what's going on worldwide in the news relating to energy. And that's where the source of this information is. So I'm going to start with the material that I saw last Friday. The previous show, of course, goes to last Thursday, a week ago today. And this starts from the Energy Collective. We got an opinion piece opening the multi-trillion-dollar market for energy management. Energy management is one of the most important parts of our changing energy landscape. It is a market that is part energy efficiency, part big data solution, and part Internet of Things. Alex, do you know what the Internet of Things is?
Not sure. The Internet is full of things.
It's full of things. What we're talking about here is the role of the utility disappearing in favor as the generator of electricity, and to a certain extent the provider, and becoming a manager. And we're seeing some very interesting experiments going on in Vermont right now. Green Mountain Power, which is our largest utility, is putting together a microgrid in Rutland. And other microgrids are being created in various places. And these are systems that will stand alone when the grid goes down. And a hope for some people is that they will become the norm, which would mean that any community would have its own microgrid. And that makes the utility the energy manager as opposed to the energy provider. From the Huffington Post, we have this: Greenland and Antarctica are home to the two largest ice sheets in the world, and a new report released Wednesday, that is a week ago yesterday, says that they are contributing to sea level rise twice as fast as they were just 5 years ago. Steve, you don't have a comment on that?
No.
Okay. From Bloomberg, we have this: Microsoft Corporation has left the American Legislative Exchange Council, also known as ALEC, because of concerns about the lobbying group's opposition to renewable energy, according to the Sustainability Group and Walden Asset Management, sustainable investing and asset management companies. On Saturday, August 23rd, we got news from ReNews. Chinese wind turbine manufacturer Goldwind boosted its net profit for the first half of 2014 by 256.8%. To 330 million yuan.
What percent? 200 and something?
256.8.
But there's no such thing as 256.8%. It's mathematically you can't have more than 100%. Did you know that?
You can't have more than 100% of a thing, but you can change a number.
Yeah, but you should say it's increased by a factor of 1.6 or 2. It's not clear what it means when you say something's increased by 260%.
The thing that I object to on this is, if you say it is increased by 256.8%, does that mean that it has been increased by a factor, as you said, of
is it 1.6, 2.6 or 3.6?
Exactly.
Nobody knows. That's why they do it that way, but it's phony.
It is something that I object to. I don't say that on the show very much, but I don't read figures like this very much. And
No,
unfortunately, when you read the articles, they're very seldom all that clear about it.
Yeah, I know. It's a way of making things a bit vaguer, but on the other hand, it gets across the message that there is an impressive increase.
An impressive increase.
That's the point.
That's the point.
Yeah.
And that was compared with a year ago, and that is on the back of what they call a sector recovery. You know, Steve, this reminds me of in the gas crisis in 1973, a reporter stood in front of a camera with the corporate headquarters behind him in the background, saying, "This oil company has increased its profits by 700%," as though this was a complete scandal. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, so if their profits a year ago were a penny a share and now they're 7 cents a share, is that a scandal?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. And what would he have said if their company had run at a net loss last year? How do you express that scandalous figure when it is negative?
Yeah, I don't know. You see, the point is, if you're making 1 cent profit and it goes down to 0.8 cents profit, then that's a 20% reduction. That's correct.
Yeah.
But if you go from 1 cent to 8 cents, then 8 cents now becomes 100%, and 1 cent was 12%. So it's gone up from
the way that you say it was a year ago, it was 12%, 12.5% of what it is now.
Of what it is now, yeah. Or it's gone up by a factor of 8. That's really the correct way of saying it.
Okay.
I wish we could educate everybody to do that.
Well, it would be nice. It would make things clearer.
It would make things clear, which of course is not what they want.
So, that was from Renews. We can blame them for all that messy figuring. From Clean Technica on Saturday, we got this. Investment bank UBS, which will appear again in this show, says the addition of electric vehicles and the proliferation of battery storage will solve the problem of intermittency for rooftop solar and make it viable without subsidies. And this is within the next 6 years. I didn't have it down on the paper, but I happen to remember that.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
We're getting into a time when it's going to be cheaper for people to make their own power at their own homes, store it at their own home, than it is to buy it from the utility. And that means that if you, for an average person, if they finance the car, the solar panels, and the battery, the payment will be less than if they finance a gas-powered car and pay to the electric company, which is why the utilities, if they're going to survive, are going to have to go into the energy management business instead of the energy provision. From JD Supra, the same day, we have this: housing authorities that are seeking alternate energy sources or new funding streams will be particularly interested in HUD's latest PIH notice. What is a PIH notice? Anybody know? Somebody knows, I'm sure. Somebody who's interested in PIH notices will know what it is. And if you're not interested in PIH notices, then this is probably a good time to yawn and reach for your coffee. Its changes seek to encourage the use of on-site renewable energy technology at federally subsidized housing projects. That was from JD Supra. On Sunday, August 24th, we got this from Clean Technica. Soon after Navigant Research. Navigant, are you familiar with Navigant?
Yeah, I don't know why, but I know the name.
This, I think, is another one of those financial organizations that gives advice.
I don't know. I know the name, but
they
I don't
have
know why.
a subsidiary called Pike Engineering, and Pike Engineering has done a lot of research They predicted investment in microgrids will reach $31 billion in the Asia-Pacific region by 2023.
Now, what if they're wrong?
Well, then what happens is their customers say, you were wrong, and so we're going to have our investments in
That
another
never
company
happens.
that's
I've
right.
seen over and over again people make predictions and they're wrong, and nobody takes accountability. There is no accountability anymore.
That's weather people. When
That's-
weather
it's-
people
it's-
are wrong, it's normal.
It's every people. I saw a case in my hometown some years ago where they did a traffic survey, the architects of the project, and they said this will have no impact at all on traffic. And of course they were wrong. They lied, or they made it up, or they guaranteed it, but they were wrong. And it did have an impact, but now it's too late.
What was not going to have an
I
impact?
can't remember what it was now, but it was a project that was obviously going to have an impact on traffic because it was increasing traffic, but they said no, it won't.
Yep.
And there's no accountability.
Well, the people like Navigant and so forth are trying to maintain the believability of their statements. So they, I think, try harder than people who have got a vested interest in installing traffic equipment.
Yeah, but well, maybe.
And maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, Navigant Research predicted $31 billion in the Asia-Pacific region by 2023. It released another report a few days later saying that a report investigating smart grid technologies and predicted that market spending will total $600 billion from 2014 to 2023, and that is what they're saying is that's going to be spending in smart grid technology. And that, I think, basically what happens is that if you think about baseload power plants, the big coal plants and nuclear plants and so forth, those plants are like tea kettles. They boil water, except that the tea kettles are so big that it takes a couple of days to get them up to pressure, not 5 minutes or something. And so the result of that is that you can't shut the thing down or even ramp it back at night the way that you could just turn off a tea kettle and say, I'm going to have this thing in the morning. So they have to produce at 100% power all night in order to be able to produce at 100% power during the day. And the result of that is that they're a really bad match for grid demand.
Yeah.
Which is why we have daytime power rates that are very high compared to the nighttime rates. Which is why the Northfield Power Station was put together. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Northfield Power Station buys power from the grid when the price of power is low at night. And it pumps the water up from the Connecticut River to the top of a mountain where they have a little reservoir, little being 100 acres or something, in excess of 100 acres. And then during the daytime, when the price of power is high, they allow that water to run back down again, and they use it to drive turbines that produce power.
So they're converting heat energy into potential energy.
Yes.
But I bet the efficiency of that process is not very high.
Ah, how do you define efficiency?
Heat, energy out divided by energy in.
Right. How about if you define efficiency differently?
Then you can do whatever you want to do.
That's right. And the efficiency in this particular case is going to be defined as how efficient is it in terms of the amount of money they spend versus the amount of money they make.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what happens is they use energy, as you know, you can't get something for nothing. They use energy at night, and they don't produce as much during the daytime, so they lose energy constantly. But they buy their energy at a price that is sufficiently lower at night that when they sell the energy during the daytime, they're making money.
Yeah.
And their output from that plant, which, by the way, if you go there, looks like a park, because it is a park. You can go through and hiking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Their output is about double that of Vermont Yankee, the nuclear power plant. And that was built as Vermont Yankee was being built because Vermont Yankee is a bad match for grid demand. Now, today we've got renewable power from wind and solar, which is intermittent or variable. But all power is intermittent or variable. Any power plant except for the sun can go down, and we don't know that the sun, we know that the sun is going to go down sooner or later. We just don't know when.
Later rather than sooner, though.
Probably later rather than sooner. And so the result of that is that you have to start asking, what is the cost of the power failure of a power plant relative to the price? And it turns out that the price of a baseload plant going down, and they go down regularly, is a huge multiple of the price of the variability of solar and wind. But here, what we're seeing is that solar and wind have got backup systems that are inherent in the idea of using electric vehicles. And the price of batteries is going down because of electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So we wind up in a situation where people can make their own power, store their own power, use it to drive their cars at a rate that is going to be about 3 cents per mile, which takes it at a cost that is somewhat below, you know, it's like buying gasoline at a price so. It's like getting 100 miles plus per gallon of gas.
Yeah, it sounds good. It sounds too good to be true, so it probably is. I wonder, I said this to you once before, I wonder at what point all these developments start biting into the weather.
Yes.
Because you're taking energy out of the atmosphere, and if everybody has their own wind turbine, at some point it's going to affect the weather.
People aren't going to have their own wind turbines.
Well, whatever they have.
will have their own solar panels.
And I think that might also, because you're absorbing the sun,
those panels are dark. They're going to heat up in the sun, and when they do, they're going to contribute to rising
but you're going to have
air
less.
currents.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, whenever you change something, I guess there could be an impact. And
yes, but there's one thing to bear in mind there, Steve, is that we're talking about solar and wind. We may be talking about geothermal power that is geothermal generating power, where you're taking heat from the crust of the Earth, which is going to be coming out anyway. You're going to be releasing it into a different pattern, but it's a third way of doing
It's going into
things.
the atmosphere now.
You've got hydropower, which does not necessarily require dams. Do you know about the hydropower plant that was put in next to Windsor Castle?
No.
You just think about the Thames here at Windsor Castle. How do you get hydropower out of the Thames at Windsor Castle? That river is darn near flat, barely moving.
But most rivers are down near flat.
Yeah, but how do you get electric power out of the Thames?
I don't know.
I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you're going to.
There's a weir,
Yeah.
a short distance upstream. It was put in order to allow for a canal lock, so the barges could go up and down the Thames. It was put in 200 years ago.
Yeah.
And the weir has a difference in height of about I think it was 7 feet. Mm-hmm. And what they did was they have two canal locks there, but they have other places in the weir, and they put in 2 Archimedes screw turbines. And these things are Archimedes screws. And they're 12 feet across, but they generate power if there's you can get power out of one of these things with a 3-foot drop. So they have 2 of these turbines that were put in, and those 2 turbines provide all the power for Windsor Castle.
It's interesting, but again, I mean, the energy is coming from somewhere.
The energy is coming from somewhere, but the point that I'm making is you've got many, many different ways to generate power, and if you spread the power generation among those ways and introduce efficiencies, then you can get it to a point where the disturbance that you're creating is spread out a lot.
Maybe, but if you're taking energy out of the water and energy out of the atmosphere and energy out of the ground and energy out of the oceans, at some point, I mean, I don't know what the population of the planet doing that would have to be to have a tipping point. But I don't think, I've never seen a calculation that anybody's done, but at some point it's going to have an impact on global weather.
Yes, and what we have to do is figure out what that is.
It would be nice to know.
But also what we have to do is figure out how it compares with the use of fossil fuels and nuclear power.
Yeah. But the other thing that I harp on about all the time is we live on a sphere. I'm always saying that we live on a sphere.
Yes.
And your business about generating heat 24 hours is not efficient because you only really need it during the day, and what do you do in the night? And I say, well, my night is somebody else's day. Somebody else on the planet is having a day while I'm having a night. And you'd think some global distribution of energy would be the most efficient way of handling it.
It actually would be. We've got to a point now where the new technology has got us to a point where the line losses for...
Oh, they're negligible now, I believe.
They've gone, in some cases, below 3%.
Yeah.
At
I thought you were going to say below zero.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, every Sunday morning I get a whole bunch of stuff in from one of my news sources talking about people who have power sources where they have a motor and it's going and it drives a generator which is going, and the generator produces enough power to drive the motor and light the light bulb. And they haven't figured out how to explain that to me, but they have figured out how to explain it to their investors, I suspect.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably.
But
let's hope so.
The line losses are so low.
Yeah, they are.
That 30 years ago they were 9.5%, and the DOE, or the equivalent of the DOE, I don't know when the DOE was established, was saying that was a low enough line loss that you could send DC high voltage power 4,000 miles and that would be cost effective. Now, when you decrease the line loss from 9.5% to under 3%, if 4,000 miles was cost effective at 9.5%, what is it going to be at under 3%?
Yeah.
Is it going to be 3 times or 4 times as great? Because 4 times 4,000 miles is 3 times 3,000 miles.
It depends what you're talking about. I mean, normally line loss, I thought anyway, was quoted as a percentage per unit
per
of
thousand,
distance.
per 1,000 miles.
So 3% per 1,000 miles.
Yeah.
So you lose 3% in 1,000 miles.
Right.
So if you send it 4,000 miles, you lose 12%, I guess.
Right. And what they were saying was that 4,000 miles at 9.5% was cost effective.
And that would be about 40%. So you keep 60% over 4,000
Right.
miles versus you keep now 90 or 88%. So it goes from 60% to 88%.
Right.
That's the effective difference.
That's right. But what that means is that the distance you can transmit it cost effectively has been increased.
It's been increased, yeah.
And it's been increased to a point where if it isn't halfway around the world, it's close to halfway around the
And
world.
in fact, with 3% loss, you can transmit 12,000 miles with the same
right.
efficiency
So-
as you used to be able to do
so-
4,000 at 9%.
Right. So
that means you could send it to the other side of the planet.
That's right.
And make it a global grid.
And actually what you could do is when it arrives there, you could send it back again in the opposite direction, and then you could have that generator.
But there'll
which
be none left because they'll be using it.
I was going to say you could have that generator being driven by a motor, which is also lighting the lights. The reason I'm laughing, for anybody who's watching this who might wonder, is you can't get something for nothing. And there are a lot of people who tell you that you can.
Yeah.
But we should keep going. Okay, that was from Clean Technica. This is also from Clean Technica. There seems to be a lot of hysteria online about bird deaths associated with the Ivanpah solar plant in California. Were you familiar with that?
I think I've heard this.
Yeah. Now, it says, for example, one news article calls the solar power plant a death ray, that's their words, quoted, as if it was a weapon, and that hundreds of thousands of birds might be dying, or 28,000, or perhaps it's 1,000.
Or perhaps it's none.
Well, no, they know that there's some because they found 288.
Well, birds do die.
They, yes, we can be assured that any bird that hatches is going to die.
Pretty much, that's right.
What's happening here is that the Ivanpah plant is a big tower.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's 3 of them, as I recall. But the tower is collecting heat, and the heat is supplied by mirrors that focus sunlight on the tower. They are controlled by computers, and that tower has molten salt, which it pushes into a reservoir, and this makes it possible to generate power into the night from solar power. And of course it focuses the solar power.
Hence the death ray.
hence the death ray. And birds that fly in among those concentrated
They have
mirrors will occasionally get singed
a few
and die.
nanoseconds of bliss.
I don't think that's what they're feeling.
I don't know.
But there's a lot of controversy about that.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Okay, on Monday the 25th, the commander of the U.S. Defense Logistics Agency Energy, and I don't understand the grammar of that title, but there it is, dismisses the denialism rampant in American politics and society with, and this is a quote, "Call it climate change, call it the big blue rabbit. I don't give a hoot what you call it. The military has to respond to those kinds of things." That was from a paper called the Japan Focus, but I could have got it out of American papers too. That's just the first one I came to. The military is very concerned about climate change, very concerned about climate change. And that is something that I find interesting. From Contra Costa Times, we have this. A proposal to build one of the world's largest solar farms in a rural valley south of Silicon Valley, in a rural area south of Silicon Valley, has cleared one of its final hurdles after 5 years of planning and environmental debate. The 247 megawatt facility still awaits final environmental permit. And my understanding is that that is a solar photovoltaic system, not one of these concentrating solar systems. Concentrating solar, by the way, is a good deal more expensive than photovoltaics. And honestly, I suspect that concentrating solar, the reason why is something that appeals to people because they want to have big facilities that are run by big companies as opposed to small facilities that are on people's rooftops or distributed through the countryside. And that, I think, is going to be an issue as time goes on. On Tuesday, the 26th of August, we got this, and this is another opinion piece. It is called "It's Time to Join the Revolution." That's the title. And it comes from the Swiss Clean Technica, but what they're talking about is, again, the Swiss investment bank UBS. This is the advice they're giving their clients. The Swiss bank is giving their clients advice to join the revolution. It says the payback time for unsubsidized investment in electric vehicles plus rooftop power plus battery storage, which is what we were talking about just a minute ago, might be as low as 6 to 8 years by 2020. And basically what they're saying is, if you're investing, you want to be on the right side of where this is going, and the wrong side is going to be places like the fossil fuel industry and organizations that are dependent on it. I found out today, interestingly enough, that in the United States there are over 3,000 utility companies, but only less than 1,000 actually generate their own power. The rest buy power and provide it. And any of those companies could go into business generating the power by using solar or wind, or both. Or one of the tricks that we have in Vermont is farms, dairy farms, if they have more than a certain number of cattle, it might be more than 40, but it might be 100, I don't know. They take the farm waste, agricultural waste, and put it into biodigesters, and then instead of emitting methane into the atmosphere, they burn the methane and use that to produce electrical power, which is put on the grid, and the agricultural waste that they've got is being turned into fertilizer. So they've got something that in the past they might have spread on their fields after it had composted, or they might have sold. But it was much more destructive to the atmosphere. Much more
polluting, yeah.
And they're replacing it with something which makes them a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's not just them. One of the things that I've brought up a number of times is that about a year ago I read about a biodigesting operation in London, which was being put together at a cost of 270 million, I'm going to think pounds here,
Probably.
It might have been that I got a translated figure, but it was just gathering restaurant and hotel food waste.
Yeah.
And of course, because of the system that's going on in London right now, that is a very, very high quality compost they're going to be getting.
You see, these are two examples that are almost counter examples to your statement that you don't ever get anything for nothing.
This is efficiency when you're dealing with money. You can actually buy electrical power at night in some parts of the United States on some nights for negative amounts of money.
Yeah.
Which means that when you sell it, if you divide the
You can sell it for nothing and make money.
and there's an economist named Jeremy Rifkin who wrote a thing for the Wall Street Journal a couple of months ago, and we talked about that on this show. He had a piece in the Wall Street Journal that was entitled "Be Prepared to Say Goodbye to Capitalism as You Know It." And the reason is because he says a new system, which is neither capitalism nor socialism, is being established, and it's called the Collaborative Commons. And it's a system under which things are given away for one reason or another. And we can see that working already. This TV show is an example of the Collaborative Commons. All right? I'm producing a TV show. I'm starring in a TV show. I'm a star of a TV show. And it is not costing me a cent to do this.
No.
Brattleboro, the BCTV, has allowed me to come in and use all of this equipment in the studio, which is a marvelous studio compared to the studio that was up the hill from where I lived when I was a little kid. And it's very sophisticated compared to that studio, not compared obviously to CNN.
It certainly is.
But it's a very sophisticated setup, and I'm here for free. And I can tell people things for free. I can express my opinions for free. I can express my creativity for free.
Yes.
But
you're sharing the benefit of your knowledge and wisdom, and that.
I don't know about wisdom, but I've certainly got more knowledge than I need.
But it's worth something. You're actually providing something of worth, and you're not charging for it.
That's correct. So I'm partaking of this Collaborative Commons. And what's happening eventually, you see, is that BCTV gets support from somebody who is charging the cable customer, and the cable customer is not paying a huge amount of money for that. But if you consider, the programming over a weekly period and how much they're actually putting into it, it's not a huge amount of money. But all of these things are happening for free or small amounts of money compared to what it would have been if I had done this 40 years ago. To have this program on the air 40 years ago, I would have had to convince somebody to pay a lot of money to support it. I would have had to have a sponsor. I don't have a sponsor.
No.
And what has happened is the same thing with blogs. And I've talked about this before. The first computer I worked with had little iron donuts for memory.
Yeah.
And those things, I was told, cost $1 each.
Yeah.
Sewn in. They had to be sewn in by hand.
Was that 1 bit?
1 bit cost $1. And somebody said to me, really, it's not really $1 a bit. That's where it started. But by the time this computer was built, it was probably down around 60 cents.
Yeah.
You go into Staples and you buy a chip to put in your camera. It's a 32 gigabyte chip and it costs $17. And that's less than 1/1,000,000 of a cent per bit. So the price of that $1 a bit has gone to less than 1/1,000,000 of a cent. The price of computer memory long ago was approaching zero. So I am invited to go to WordPress and set up my blog, and they will give me the free space. They'll give me 3 gigabytes to set up my blog for free. And if I want 2 blogs, then they'll give me that twice over. And if I want 15 blogs, then they'll give it to me 15 times over. They want me to have those blogs because of 2 things. One of which is that it gives them something they can give, that they can show. And secondly, they want me to go in and buy something from them. But that again is the collaborative commons. And
You're probably very popular because of the fees you pay your guests.
that could have something to do with the popularity. Yes, absolutely.
Said he, laughing hollowly. But I guess you're right,
Okay.
that's all part of the collaborative.
It's all part of the
whatever.
collaborative commons. And Jeremy Rifkin is saying, well, it's going to get to the point in not very many years where people are going to, and not just people, but organizations that own these things are going to say, oh, holy smokes, the marginal cost of producing electricity from solar PVs is very close to zero. We could give this power away. And the fact that they can give that away means that they have got some sort of advantage in the marketplace somewhere
Yeah, they'll
else.
find something else they can charge for.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
But
capitalism will
ultimately-
never die because it's based on greed, and greed is a
But
fundamental
you see, this is
human
the thing.
characteristic.
What Jeremy Rifkin was saying was not be prepared to say goodbye to capitalism. What he was saying was be prepared to say goodbye to capitalism as you know it.
As you know it, yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he's saying it's going to hang
But it's
around.
been changing even in my lifetime.
Absolutely.
It changes continuously.
Absolutely, it
Talking
does.
of economists, I mean, this is not on the subject, but I saw somewhere recently they've been blaming, Paul Krugman, who's an excellent economist, by the way. I mean, sometimes he says things that other economists don't agree with, and he's been blamed for bringing down the French government.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which French government?
That Hollande just had to get rid of the entire cabinet and appoint a new cabinet, and they were infighting. Some of them apparently were quoting Krugman's economic policies and disagreeing with the austerity direction of the French government, because
Well, we've
Krugman's
got-
anti-austerity.
We've got organizations in the United States that want to take over aspects of the government and steer it to go into certain directions, and Koch Industries is one of these. And this is what we were talking about earlier with Microsoft saying goodbye to ALEC because ALEC's opposition to renewable power is so determined to prevent it from getting into place. And we're in an interesting kind of puzzle with how to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you don't mind,
Onwards and upwards.
onwards and upwards. From Gazette.net, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission recently reopened a year-old petition from anti-nuclear groups concerning the financial ability of Entergy Corp to safely operate its nuclear plants, including Vermont Yankee. And this is Deb Katz, who is down in Massachusetts, was one of the people who was behind this, and the Citizens Awareness Network. They were basically saying Entergy can't be considered qualified to operate nuclear reactors because they're in financial trouble. And the NRC told them that they wanted to know what was going on internally in Entergy's finances, and Entergy said it's none of your business. So the NRC said, yeah, I guess you're right, and went away. And now what they've done is they've come back again and said, we really do need to know that you've got the money that you need to keep these plants going. So that was something that Deb Katz was in the news nationwide because of that. From the Boston Globe. Have you ever heard of the Boston Globe?
No.
A wise guy responds to a wise guy
We call it the Boston
question.
Globe.
Massachusetts has reached a milestone. This, I think, is impressive. The number of solar installations statewide has surpassed, guess the figure.
A percentage?
No, this is a number. How many-
300%. No, money
No, this is the number of solar installations in Massachusetts.
has passed.
What do you suppose the number that it
15.
has passed? 15,000.
Yeah.
The state now has 15,762 solar installations that produce 615 megawatts of electricity, enough to power 94,000 homes. And of course, that 615 megawatts, you have to think of it in terms of a capacity factor because it's all being produced during the daytime. And although that is a peak demand period, they're not running round the clock like Vermont Yankees. So their capacity factor is, about 20% as opposed to Vermont Yankees 90%. So this is probably about a quarter or less of Vermont Yankee, but this is stuff that's been put up in the last 2 years. And replacing Vermont Yankee with that and the batteries and the electric vehicles and so forth that UBS was talking about is something that could happen within a couple of years. On Wednesday, yesterday, from Clean Technica, we got this. And this again is an opinion piece, and the title is Renewable Energy Momentum Has Passed the Tipping Point. And the line here is, here in the Ides of August, Ides, 2014, there exists clear, overwhelming, convincing evidence that we have passed the tipping point for a change into the renewable energy era. I agree. Also from Clean Technica, yesterday we got this. Indian wind turbine manufacturer and project developers have advised the government to make efforts to increase annual capacity addition to 5 times its current level. A leading Indian newspaper reported this. The amount that they are adding each year will be about 10,000 megawatts, and that is the equivalent of perhaps 3 nuclear power plants every year being added in wind energy. And so we have to worry about how much energy is being obstructed as the atmosphere pushes its air across India and turns those turbines. You're removing energy from... If you remove energy from the air, do you suppose that could slow down hurricanes?
It might do. It might have a very beneficial effect, but it might. I mean, the trouble with the atmosphere is so damn complicated. I mean,
it's chaotic.
It's chaotic.
You can have a rainstorm in Vermont because of a butterfly flapping its wings in Tokyo.
Yeah.
At least that's what we've been told.
We've certainly been told that.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Chaos is a very interesting thing to study.
Yeah, I know. I'd hate to be a meteorologist. Can you imagine studying chaotic systems all day long?
Well, you know, you were talking about people predicting things and having to be held into account. And I remember somebody suggesting at some point that any meteorologist who proved on a given day to be wrong about the weather should be exposed to people being allowed to throw tomatoes at him.
Yeah, not tomatoes.
No, tomatoes.
So it must have been a British meteorologist.
No, that was a Midwest meteorologist. Okay.
Well, they say that if somebody says to you, what will the weather be like tomorrow? And you say, it will be pretty much the same as it is today. You're right more often than any meteorologist.
I understand that's no longer true.
And I suspect that's no longer true. They used to say that, but I think the meteorologists have caught up. They're right about as often now as the guy who says tomorrow will be the same. Or maybe they've learnt the trick.
Well, the trick, you see, is easy. Tomorrow will be different.
But they're wrong if they say that.
Ah, you're right. I'm wrong. That's a very interesting philosophical statement.
200% of the time you're wrong.
This statement is wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's go on. Nearly 1 in 4 homes in South Australia now has rooftop solar, as the share of renewable energy in the state neared 33% in 2013 to 14, delivering the state's ambitious 2020 target 6 years ahead of schedule. And now, when you think about that, you'll understand why the Australians are so adamant about stopping renewable power. It isn't the people, it's the government, it's the coal industry, and it's the utility industry. They're being destroyed. They're being pulled apart by ordinary people and now businesses putting in solar power.
Well, they have to adapt. I mean, how do you think the slide rule people felt when little computers came out? I mean, they had to adapt.
Well, Keufel and Esser went out of the slide rule business very quickly.
Yeah, but you always have to. You can't be Luddites. I mean, Luddites never win because technology always changes. Things change, things advance.
There are places where Luddites win.
Yeah, the coal industry probably is an example.
No, they're going to lose. If you were a violin manufacturer, as a Luddite, you might win.
If you're a violin manufacturer.
Because people will always appreciate violins that are made out of wood and varnished, and it doesn't have to be an electric violin.
It's a niche market, and that's a good one to be in, probably.
And I think there are a lot of those niche markets, but The utility industry, I think, is going to be one of those niche markets that doesn't survive in any form or in any percentage.
It's actually an interesting point. I wonder if there are any places on the planet where it makes sense to have national utilities. It may be that there's nowhere where it makes sense. Everybody, as you said earlier in the show, everybody has their own power generation system. Like everybody has their own refrigerator today, so you don't have to buy ice from the iceman. Everybody has their own car. Everybody has their own TV. Everybody has...
Well, I think everybody having their own of something makes a certain amount of sense.
It certainly does, doesn't it? Yeah.
The business of the car is something that I think actually doesn't. It would make much better sense to have super good public transportation, I think.
Yeah.
But not for everybody.
My disappointment with public transportation is the public abuses it. And I don't know how you prevent that. I mean, I see that all the time when I take the T in Boston or the buses. They're damaged by the people who
But do you see
use
that
the
in Germany?
passengers. To a less extent, yeah.
Yeah.
But I see it even in Switzerland.
Well, when I was in Germany, and admittedly this was just a little bit over 50 years ago.
It's not changed much.
I spent a couple of days in a youth hostel at Heidelberg. And the youth hostel is a little ways away from the center of town. So if you wanted to go from the youth hostel to the center of town, you'd walk a half a mile to a stop of a cable car. Not a cable car, it was some sort of tram. And then ride that to the middle of town. And it was perhaps a mile or two out of town, and I remember riding on that and seeing women coming on board looking like they were carrying small pizza boxes. And I asked somebody, what are those? And he said, those are boxes containing eggs. And the people who were carrying them were women who lived on farms just outside of the city, and they were carrying their eggs to market. And they were doing that on public transportation. So the farm wives were taking their eggs to market on public transportation. And, you know, that is a very different kind of system than we have, and as far as I know, anywhere in the United States. I can't imagine anybody taking
But
their eggs.
Germany is a special place. I mean, the world is really not like Germany. I mean, even Europe, none of the countries in Europe are like Germany. It's a very, very special place. With the people, everybody, just maintains and has very high standards of responsibility. And most countries are not like that. Certainly this country is not like that. People here are much freer. You know, they don't call Germany the land of the free.
Well, on the other hand, they don't call the United States the land of the responsible.
No,
and
they call it the land of the free. And it's a very free-spirited place. It's totally different attitude.
Right. Well, but I think there comes a point where freedom infringes on safety, for example.
Look how hard it is to get people to wear seatbelts in their cars in this country.
We try.
I know, and people just say, no, you're infringing on my freedom, and damn right we're infringing on your freedom. But I think there's an easier way of solving that problem, and most problems, and that is increase the insurance coverage. You have to fill out a questionnaire, do you wear seatbelts? And if you put no, then you pay a bigger premium.
And if you say yes, and it turns out that you're in an accident
liar,
where you were not one.
Then you get thrown into prison for life if the cops catch you.
Okay, if you don't mind, I think I'm going to go to today's news.
Yeah, excellent.
GE's energy consulting business has presented an extensive study that modeled the Eastern interconnection in the United States. It determined that when equipped with appropriate model plant controls, wind applications can substantially enhance grid resiliency. That came from Earth Techlink. What this means is that as we put more and more wind onto the grid, more and more wind power, and I suspect the same controls would apply to solar and other types of renewable power, the grid becomes more resilient. And really, when you think about this, it makes sense. It sounds counterintuitive that an intermittent or variable power supply would make the grid more resilient, but in fact, there is no such thing as a power supply that can't fail.
Yeah.
And when a big 700 megawatt or 1200 megawatt or 2000 megawatt plant goes down, it can cause big problems.
Yes.
And the cost of providing backup for that sort of problem is very high when the plants are very big. And there was a thing a couple of weeks ago where there was a study in Texas, and what they found was that the cost of backing up the variable wind or solar, well, I guess it was wind or solar, variable renewable power in Texas, was less than 0.04% of the power bill. But the cost of backing up big grid power was about 0.6% of the power bill. So even when you account for it on a per unit basis, you wind up having big plants that are called baseload plants costing more in the regular power bill to provide backup power for than the intermittent solar and wind. And that, I think, covers, that is partly because of the nature of distributed power. It's all over the place geographically, but it's also in terms of technology all over the place, because there's so many different technologies that can be used.
Another example of the value of diversity, actually.
Yes, the value of diversity, exactly. Okay, that was from Earth Techling. Now today, from Business Insider Australia, I never pronounce anything right, except if it's in German.
Except tomato.
Except tomato, that's right. The Australian federal government has released its review of its renewable energy target, and it concludes that the costs of the scheme outweigh the benefits. And it has recommended that the scheme either be shelved or changed. And of course, the commission that made the recommendation was chosen on the basis of its impartiality on the question of climate change. It was made up of a bunch of people who don't believe in climate change and will say that they're ready to believe it if they can just be shown that it's true.
I bet those people believe in Santa Claus. The ones who don't believe in climate change.
Oh, I don't think they believe in Santa Claus, but I believe that they would believe in Santa Claus if you could show that he was real. Folks, go to Australia, tell them you saw Santa Claus.
On TV in Brattleboro, Vermont.
Okay, and we have two final items here that are being presented together. Coming from the United States, the first one is from PV Magazine. Renewable energy sources accounted for 14.3% of net U.S. electrical generation for the first half of 2014. According to a new report from the EIA. Last year, the EIA forecast that the United States would reach the 14% renewable mark in 2040.
What is the EIA?
It is the Energy Information Administration, and you cannot trust any number they produce because of the way they produce the numbers. And of course, people are quoting them all the time, but they have standards that they have to adhere to, one of which is a standard that says you may not take into account the idea that Congress will ever change a law. And of course, that's like saying you are not allowed to take into account something that you know will happen, because Congress will change laws. So they project.
So what's the point of them? What's the point of it?
It gives bureaucrats an opportunity to make money.
It gives them numbers
They
that
have
they can
jobs.
quote, even though they're meaningless numbers.
I don't know what the EIA is part of the DOE, the Department of Energy. But I honestly cannot give you any information that they provide that is forward-looking, that is factual. When the information is backward-looking, it tends to be more likely to be true. Although, in this particular case, it's still not true, because they said, well, we're getting 14.3% of our power from renewables, but there are whole classes of renewables that are not taken into account, because they do account for hydropower here, but they do not account for any power unless it is tied to the grid. Which means that all these people in Vermont and New Hampshire who have or who are living off the grid,
they're not counted.
They're not counted.
Yeah. And
they are a significant portion of the people who have solar power.
Yeah.
So, you know, what they're saying is that solar power provides about 1/3% of our electricity. And in fact, the actual amount might be closer to 0.5%. that doesn't sound like much. But when you're talking about producing numbers that are going to be used by Congress, by banks, by whatever, it's a serious problem when you're that consistently wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
And the second thing that we have, and this comes from the Smithsonian, which is possibly no better, I don't know. From June 2013 to June 2014, the U.S. produced more than 12,000 gigawatt hours of solar power. This compares to 5,600 gigawatt hours for the period from June 2012 to 2013. This is an increase of 210% year on year.
Ta-da!
Okay, so we're producing 100% of what we're producing, but a year ago we were producing about 45% of that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the news.
Some
We
of it.
have about 4 minutes in this hour show to talk about what Alex wants to talk about and what you want to talk about. And so what we'll do is we'll talk about that for 4 minutes, then we'll say goodbye to everybody, and then we will continue with another hour probably on a special.
Well, this summer, me and Steve, we've been working on researching like nuclear waste. Like, how much is there?
Yes.
How can we start getting rid of this problem?
Yes.
And what we've sort of learned is there are a lot of different ways that you can work with this, and also there's a lot of this stuff out there.
Yes, there is.
Like,
a lot.
there are
Enough to sink a ship.
and this is stuff that's going to be radioactive for like tens of thousands of years.
I got news
And-
for you, Alex. It's going to be radioactive forever.
Yeah. So basically what we need to do is, me and Steve, we're going to start up this Kickstarter.
Mhm.
And hopefully if we get this money, we're going to put together a committee of experts, I guess you could say. And we're going to write a document on what we think is the way we should be tackling nuclear waste.
Okay, I'm going to
And-
stop you there. Okay, we're coming up on our hour. We started just about an hour ago. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody who has been watching this show, Energy Week, with George Harvey and Tom Fennell, without Tom Fennell, but with Alex Fay and Steve Reucroft as guests. And so I will see you in a future show. And I imagine Steve will be back, and maybe Alex will be back too to talk about this in the future. We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die. We dig and drill and waste what we find, break up the earth, leaving little behind, but we will grow lilies in the by and by. I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.